Loki escaped Logan's attack in embarrassment and quickly jumped out of the Stark mansion, but Logan was not afraid at all, and jumped down, forced Loki to curse in his heart. Moreover, there are so many difficult guys on the earth, which is beyond his expectation. Here we go again. Loki's head pierced for a while, and he immediately looked fiercely from a distance, and stared at Professor X, with a strong jealousy in his eyes. Fortunately, he has a spiritual scepter in his hand, which strengthens his spiritual ability. These shape-shifting King Kong have also participated in the battle. Very good, Martin's forces have also stepped in. Loki behaved a little crazy, and the hatred on his face was even more unforgettable. He will never forget how cruel and tyrannical the owner of these ghosts is. Thousands of shape-shifting King Kong rushed out of the land bridge in a swarm, with cold expressions, venting their firepower wildly. The soldiers who received the killing order did not have the slightest hesitation, and the scarlet eyes flashed with ferocity and eagerness. Killing and sabotaging things like Decepticons have a natural advantage over Autobots, but this gap can be made up. Martin looked at the battlefield from a distance with a smile on the corner of his mouth, his whole body bathed in a strong smell of blood, with an expression of enjoyment on his face. Chittori, the vanguard, is just cannon fodder for training after all. These guys are so powerful, each one is equivalent to a JARVIS. I have to build the anti-shapeshifting King Kong armor as soon as possible. Hey, they have more face signs on them. Tony took a quick scan and collected a lot of data in a flash. This sudden change attracted his attention. In the chaotic and disorderly battlefield, screams and explosions are infinitely mixed, coupled with the collapse of broken tall buildings all the time, and finally turned into ruins on the ground, raising huge amounts of dust. Countless shape-shifting King Kong looked enthusiastic and roared loudly. Some stuck in the street shelling, and some directly climbed up the tall buildings, and then slashed down fiercely with a big knife, cutting a floating giant beast into two sections, extremely domineering. The two figures who walked out last are watching them silently. Megatron's scarlet eyes kept turning, and the computing core in his brain told him that his body had undergone unusual system changes while enjoying the war. The energy transmission speed has increased by 27%, and the excitement of Tinder soared by 23%. A lot of data in my body has changed, Optimus Prime, I feel excited. Megatron also knocked his head specially, searched his own database repeatedly, and said in a deep voice. Optimus Prime was silent for a while, and he had already picked up a huge sword, and said lightly, I don't like war, but if there must be war, I will definitely not be afraid. After finishing speaking, he rushed out in a vigorous step, wielding a huge sword, and instantly took away countless vanguards. The fourth-level combat power, coupled with a burly body, is simply a rampaging behemoth on the battlefield. Megatron couldn't help but roar up to the sky, looking at the blood-filled world in front of him, the two eyes that shone with appalling red light filled with a fiery attitude. Enemies flying all over the sky, flight machines falling in heavy smoke, enemy soldiers everywhere, and from that tunnel, there are a steady stream of soldiers emerging from the tunnel, as well as giant floating beasts with a visual impact. All this appeared in front of him, as if to eat him a large piece of high-quality super energy crystal, which made him feel comfortable from the heart. Megatron is born to belong to this kind of place. The huge amounts of roar is very penetrating, it is not the kind of harsh and sharp sound, but the roar and rage like beast. A large number of flight machines were attracted by this roar, and a large number of Zetaru fighters looked down at Megatron, and immediately exploded a large number of energy cannons. Bang bang bang. The energies that can instantly destroy fighter planes and armored vehicles were fired. After all bombarding Megatron's body, they did not produce any effect. Megatron just stood there and couldn't even bother to move. Die, a bunch of lowly crawlers, ha 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 ha. Megatron let out a deafening laugh, jumped up instantly, swept away with his fists, venting his firepower in the air of hundreds of meters. The roars and screams, guns and explosions were simply a battlefield created specifically for him. Countless high-rise buildings, as well as the enemy, were washed by Megatron with this violent firepower, and they were all overwhelmed. Countless shape-shifting King Kong is active on this battlefield, slaughtering the powerful enemies who invaded the Earth on a large scale. The war is flying, the artillery roars, and there are deaths and deaths at all times. This is war. This thing that easily turns bustling New York into sheer hell is the most real war. A large number of shape-shifting diamonds were slaughtered on a large scale, and their actions were extremely cruel and tyrannical. A large number of Zeta Swiss soldiers began to fight back frantically, but unfortunately, the results were few, but they caused a lot of damage to the ordinary shape-shifting diamond. Every energy bombardment can penetrate and destroy the mechanical body of a shape-shifting diamond, but that's it. Facing the more powerful orthodox shape-shifting King Kong, Chittori's energy attack is as ridiculous as itching. Orthodox shape-shifting King Kong's body material, but with the addition of vibranium elements, is born with a certain ability to absorb and radiate energy. Putting the orthodox shape-shifting King Kong on the battlefield at this time is basically slaughtering the opponent wantonly, with a feeling of bullying a child. Hiss. The blue figure of Optimus Prime flashed by, carrying a huge sword and cutting it down. At the moment when he jumped up with great power, he staggered the 700-meter-high building under his feet on the spot, and tons of waste rocks followed. The cave rolled down, fell down, and made loud noises. The whole building began to collapse, and Optimus Prime ignored the intensive artillery fire and slashed straight at the head of a floating giant beast. A harsh sound erupted. The superalloy armor on the behemoth, at the moment, as if it did not exist, it was cut off by Optimus Prime, exposing the half-blood and half-mechanical internal structure inside. With one blow, a huge amount of floating beast was slashed. The poor big guy let out a painful wailing on the spot, and fell feebly, and after crashing several buildings one after another, they collapsed. This kind of mechanical creature is very strong. I have never seen this kind of life form in the entire universe. There are no obvious shortcomings in terms of thinking, emotions, strength and body structure. How did this kind of creature be created? Captain Marvel looked at Optimus Prime in amazement, then turned to look at Megatron. His face was cautious. Even if she is level sub-godfather, facing these two special big guys, she must be cautious. A fighter plane roar screamed past, almost rubbing Captain Marvel's body and rushing over. Several missiles blasted out, blowing up a large number of vanguards. Idiot in a daze on the battlefield, get out, don't hinder us. A sneer of disdain came from this mighty fighter, full of arrogance. Captain Marvel frowned and snorted coldly, snapped. At the moment when the fighter was elated, a dark silver figure suddenly jumped up, grabbing the wings with both hands, and pulling it down. My lord? Megatron, my lord! The fighter screamed immediately and fell straight down. It seemed helpless. It seemed that he didn't dare to resist. At the same time, he could only go all the way down, turning into a humanoid combat form, becoming a Beway, shaking the sky a short guy. The blood-red electronic eyes give people an impression of cunning and alertness. Megatron's face was cold, and his huge amounts of palms grabbed the opponent's neck and shook it like a chicken. You disobeyed my order, Starscream. I order you to move forward. Keep moving forward, not backward. With a ferocious face, Megatron pinched Starscream as if trying to choke him here. No, I'm just making a short adjustment. You know, the flight squadron under my command has a large number of recruits, and I'm teaching them how to fight a good battle. Definitely, if you are not satisfied, I am now just change. Your Majesty is supreme, Lord Megatron. Starscream kept rubbing his hands, and his face was flattering, and he almost knelt down on the spot. The seemingly sincere respect and admiration almost lied to Megatron. Megatron moved his big face abruptly, and Beast's roar was full of irritability. Starscream, now, I order you to attack. Cross the time and space tunnel and attack Chittori's mothership. What? My lord, if I go, I won't be able to come back. You will lose a loyal subordinate. Starscream subconsciously glanced at the outrageous whirlpool, dumbfounded, and hugged him. Megatron's thighs. Megatron showed a malicious smile on his face and looked at this guy coldly. To be honest, he didn't like it the first time he saw this guy. Speaking of ability, Starscream's ability is definitely first class and more comprehensive. Whether it is command, control, layout, etc., there are two brushes, but the kind of drill and cunning on the opponent is also first class. Selfishness is too heavy. Megatron hates selfish subordinates. He prefers Shockwave. He only needs to give a mission goal, and then Shockwave will quickly integrate the most logical method from the existing information, and then execute it. And Starscream is jumping like a joker. Sometimes watching each other jump is an extremely pleasant experience. Open black lens bracket Starscream close black lens bracket open black lens bracket Decepticon Legion Flight Squadron Commander close black lens bracket. Character: Cunning, Execution plus 10%, Height, 9 meters. Energy: 8.6 million, open black lens bracket Body: Healthy close black lens bracket, Combat Power, Level 3. Famous quotes: 1. Lord Megatron, Your Majesty is supreme. 2. I really am the natural leader of the Decepticons. Close black lens bracket. Evaluation: Commander of the flight unit of the Decepticon Legion. Starscream always considers himself to be the most attractive and cunning character among Decepticons, and tries to get others to admit this. He thinks too much of himself, so he often does embarrassing things like being superior and inferior. Close black lens bracket. This is Starscream, with a talent that even Megatron can't ignore. In the original book, Megatron time and time again, reluctant to kill this guy who frequently messes up and betrays him time and time again. It's really because it's so easy to use, and it's also so fun. An ambitious man who has a strong talent but always yells to overthrow him with a good eye and hands makes Megatron really have too much fun in his unpretentious and boring life. Megatron grinned and threw Starscream away fiercely, with a loud bang, and the poor Starscream was thrown to a location a few hundred meters away, embarrassed. When he looked up again, he was suddenly startled. Captain Marvel has rushed into the space-time tunnel, and started to go straight to the enemy's mothership to kill the past. In the deep cosmic vacuum, a huge fleet is traversing, and a steady stream of troops are sent into the Earth. Captain Marvel had a cold face and went straight to the mothership. But at the moment when she was about to hit the mothership through like a meteor, a figure suddenly appeared, blocking her directly, and then a sickle was chopped over. The terrifying edge made Captain Marvel his face changed, and he backed away quickly. Who are you? Captain Marvel had an ugly face, and looked at the creature that was no less than his own. The leader of the 5 Obsidian Generals, General Corvus Glaive. General Corvus Glaive showed an ugly smile, with a gloomy breath. As soon as his voice fell, he immediately slashed it with a sickle. This weird sickle was faintly crying with countless undeads. The sharpness made Captain Marvel dare not be hard. Then, quickly stepped back and walked away. General Corvus Glaive, originally his strength can directly shake the normal Thanos. When the comics descended on the Earth, he used his own power to destroy the assembled X-Men, and even directly killed Thanos and became the master of the Dark Quadrant. To make matters worse, this guy's body is actually the sickle, not the person holding the sickle. As long as the sickle is not destroyed, he can be resurrected countless times, and ordinary people simply don't know this vital mystery. For a time, the two-level sub-godfathers faced each other in a vacuum, and a fierce battle broke out immediately. General Corvus Glaive slashed the past fiercely, and in an instant he shredded a nearby planet, and when the core exploded into fireworks, he quickly approached and slashed towards Captain Marvel. Huge amounts of golden light shone from Captain Marvel, blocking the blow in a sudden, but the powerful golden energy was cut through several layers by the sickle. This kind of lethality changed Captain Marvel's face. Several more figures appeared. What's more frightening was that a figure with terrible mental ability surging around appeared in the distance. A nearly terrible mental ability burst out, crashing into Captain Marvel's brain, and the shocked Captain Marvel felt jealous in his heart. His mind was tingling, and he hurried back. General Corvus Glaive looked at the golden figure going away, frowning, and turned his head and shouted, "Supergiant, I can kill her by myself. You acted rashly, and I lost my prey. You can't kill." Supergiant, along with the other 3 Obsidian 5 generals, appeared, and shook off a long white hair. His pale pupils looked at General Corvus Glaive, and said calmly, "The opponent's ability comes directly from infinite gems. There are some special individuals who can resonate with infinite gems. Although their qualifications are too bad, the blessing of infinite gems is still so weak, but it is still not something you can solve. If it were not for the special energy source of the other party, I could just let her commit suicide on the spot." In the eyes of the Obsidian Five, Captain Marvel is indeed a waste. With such exaggerated weapon support, it is actually just a mere level sub-godfather. The other four generals turned to look at Supergiant, with a trace of fear on their faces. Supergiant, proficient in all forms of mental ability, mind control, telepathy, mental transmission, memory stealing. If she is targeted by her, I am afraid that I don't even know how to die. She is equivalent to a level sub-godfather's Professor X. In the comics, she alone enslaves the Black Bat King of level Godfather with spirit, and then controls the Black Bat King to attack the Earth. This is the horror of the five Obsidians. There are no shortcomings. Everyone's ability is extremely strange and powerful. As Thanos' assistant, he manages the huge Dark Quadrant. It's not the time for a full-scale invasion. The main purpose is temptation. This remote planet called Earth is primitive and ignorant, but there is such a tricky guy. Koto Sergeant Ebony Maw looked contemplative. With the death of Odin and the destruction of Asgard, Martin's name gradually spread to the entire universe. Everyone knows that Odin, known as the strongest and most domineering heavenly father, was actually defeated by a human being. If you count the low-key but brutal supreme magician. The water on the Earth is a little bit deep, so deep that the Dark Quadrants are extremely jealous. I knew you would come, and you would definitely come. Loki blasted Hawkeye and Natasha Romanoff with one blow, and looked at the man who had crossed half of the Earth in one step, with a dark smile. Martin glanced casually. Natasha Romanoff and Martin looked at each other. Their expressions changed in an instant, the suffocation that seemed to be stared at by a beast, and the gaze made her almost collapse. This is the difference in nature between God and man. Martin walked slowly, and walked straight to Loki. Even if you are a god, you can never escape the control of infinite gems. Loki looked mad, completely plunged into a certain bad mental state, with a sense of cruelty and hatred. The others stayed there, but the next moment, a soft sound was heard, and another scepter was stuck in Martin's chest. The figure of Loki who had originally spoken began to dissipate. Good trick. But that's it. The hideousness on Loki's face stopped abruptly, becoming stiff, desperate, and deeply confused. Why is this? Loki looked at Martin, who was staring at him indifferently, incredulously. Snapped. Martin grabbed Loki's wrist, and then broke it, with a crisp sound. Loki's arm was directly broken by Martin on the spot. Do you think anyone is as stupid as you? Martin stepped forward and sneered in a low voice. Do you think that everyone is the same as you, constrained by the existing pattern? The breath emerging from him was extremely terrifying, almost freezing everything around him. Even Loki felt a bit of coldness, not to mention ordinary people like Natasha Romanoff and Hawkeye. The ground beneath his feet began to shatter, turning into countless atoms, and disintegrating little by little. Countless people in New York were shivering under the cover of Martin. After all, you are just a dog of Thanos. To me, you are not as good as a dog. Martin laughed dumbly, and took the scepter away with his hands. Why are you not affected by the scepter? Why do you seem to know the power of the scepter? I know you were born in an area on the Earth, and you have no chance to touch the secrets of the level universe. Why? Loki he caught his broken arm and staggered back with a sorrowful smile on his face. Martin looked down at the scepter in his hand, feeling the terrifying power that extended the power of the mind to the extreme, with a hint of amazement on his face. Mind Gem. The rule of the ability of all minds in a single universe is concretized. With Mind Gem in hand, it is equivalent to possessing the supreme mind ability of this universe. Indeed, whoever can own infinite gems and control them perfectly is equivalent to standing at the end of a certain path in one step. It is the supreme power that makes people fascinated. And now, from now on, Mind Gem is mine. Martin gently broke the scepter with both hands, and then grabbed the stone at the tip of the scepter with his bare hands, and violently pulled it down. Loki's eyes suddenly lit up, and a cruel smile came up at the corner of his mouth, with a strong sense of madness. He almost saw Martin die here. You are done. Being able to resist the power of the scepter does not mean that you have the ability to directly touch the infinite gems. Even the level Godfather, it is difficult to directly contact the infinite gems. Loki's face was ferocious. Huge amounts of yellow light emerged and swept the entire earth in a flash. All the life forms shrouded in this strange light only felt that the spirit and soul were washed by an invisible palm, and a large amount of information impurities were swept away and become pure. Professor X's face changed and he was shocked. He was most sensitive to the ability of the soul. He hurriedly raised his head to look at the core of the burst of spiritual light. Martin, control it. Uncontrolled psychic power is more dangerous than any power. If you are not careful, countless people will be modified in their will and thinking. Professor X intends to talk to Martin, but his own psychic power is killed. He was totally excluded, unable to intervene at all, and could only shout at the moment. Martin turned a deaf ear to his ears, just carefully looking at the power of this mind gem and feeling it personally. This was the first time he touched infinite gems. Moreover, touching it directly with flesh and blood directly caused an almost terrifying spiritual storm that swept the world. Infinite gems, good thing, this is a shortcut to reach the top of the universe at the fastest speed in a single universe. Although I don't need this shortcut, I can't let others use this shortcut either. You must cut off your own path that you don't take, so that everyone else can't go. The violent mental storm slowly gathered. Martin held the mind gem in one hand, and kept feeling, and gradually grasped the method of using this gem, and then controlled the mind gem to gradually suppress all fluctuations. Eventually, the storm subsided. Only Martin holding infinite gems is left. From now on, the destiny has changed, and I am the man of this universe, the destiny. Loki, what's the point of being a dog for Thanos? Be my lackey. Martin looked down and looked at Mind Gem, who was lying in his palm obediently, with a horrible yellow flashing light all the time. He smiled, looked up, took a step, and said to Loki in a calm tone. Loki was already stunned, looking at Martin with a dull look, his desperate and silent eyes, as if he was looking at a devil who could never fight. Devil. Hearing Martin's words, his eyes were red, and he roared, "No, you never want to enslave me, no one can enslave me. It's late, it's too late for you to commit suicide." Martin directly used a trace of Mind Gem's power. In a sudden, a yellow light flashed, and suddenly hit Loki, who was desperate to commit suicide with a dagger. In an instant, Loki's will seemed to be dissected and placed directly in front of Martin. Martin just watched quietly, watching the evil god Loki's twisted will a little bit by himself. The power of Mind Gem was washed away hundreds of millions of times every moment, repeatedly adjusting and correcting Loki's will, full of loyalty. Mind Gems are already so terrifying, and the soul gem that can modify the soul at will, what terrible power should it have? Martin felt this power in silence and exclaimed. Soon, Loki's eyes were filled with endless worship and fanaticism, as if he was willing to die immediately for Martin. Unfortunately, it's a pity that you are not loyal to me, but loyal to infinite gems. Your following me, after all, is just a false illusion. Martin sighed deeply and shook his head. No, Lord Martin, I am willing to swear by Loki in the name of Odin, your will is everything to me. Loki knelt on the ground and bowed respectfully, as if he was the most pious subordinate. Martin stretched out his hand and patted him on the head. Before Loki could smile, his expression would be frozen forever in this moment of smile. Because Martin screwed off his head effortlessly. What he needs to be loyal to him, even if he is like Starscream, who is careful and thinking about thieves, he doesn't care at all. He is willing and generous, giving a large space to his subordinates to toss, he doesn't care. However, the premise is to be loyal to him, rather than being loyal to something. Cthulhu Loki, it's a pity, your original brilliance would be so dazzling, but along with Thor and Asgard, I was killed early. Martin sighed from the bottom of his heart, and at the same time turned around, His palm passed directly through the barrier of Tesseract, and the instrument was destroyed instantly, and the Tesseract was taken out. The blue crystal cube lies quietly in Martin's hands, exuding brilliance and dazzling brilliance. Not to mention the infinite gems inside, but Tesseract alone is also a rare artifact. The energy inside is extremely abundant. 2 infinite gems are available. If you count the time gem in Ancient One and the reality gem in the World Tree, there are already 4 infinite gems. Martin is a little sorry. What a powerful force, it really makes people reach the sky in one step, but unfortunately, after all, it does not belong to him originally, at least before destroying Soul Gem's self-will and completely turning infinite gems into a permanent dead object. This power still has the ability to escape, possibly, even backlash. This farce is also time to end. Martin looked up and looked at the space-time tunnel that had shrunk sharply after losing the blessings of Tesseract. He stepped directly out of the tunnel, disappeared in place, stepped into the vacuum of the universe, and arrived in front of the Zetaru mothership. Go and die. Martin took a random glance at hundreds of light years apart, then raised his hand and launched a powerful attack. In a crash, he straddled a long distance and landed directly on the mothership. At this time, Chittori's senior management, together with the 5 Obsidians, were still waiting for the outcome of the New York War with peace of mind. A terrible attack struck, and the mothership was wiped out in an instant, and countless fleets around it were also affected. At this moment, all were wrapped in terrible explosions, and a large amount of cosmic dust was produced. Martin didn't even bother to take a look at the result. For him, he just killed a group of insignificant ants at any time, which was really not worthy of his attention. If Thanos was here, he would be interested in staying, having a cordial conversation with Thanos, and then strangling him to death. How good! The huge amounts of roar swept through everything. Martin's strong shot ended the battle. Similarly, this was also his act of beckoning roar to Thanos, the cosmic butcher. We won? People on the Earth were trembling, looking at the space-time tunnel that disappeared completely in the sky. Their faces full of dust revealed an expression of disbelief. 1. All the enemies are dead. With tears streaming down, countless people knelt on the ground and wept, looking at the superhero fighting on the battlefield with grateful eyes. At the same time, they have a deeper understanding of the terrible, cruel nature of Martin and his shapeshifting kings, but they are here. In an unprecedented crisis, it gives people a sense of peace of mind. The New York War finally came to an end. The price is that most of New York City has suffered terrible trauma and was destroyed, and the direct death toll has reached 10 million. Many people are in the ruins, wiping away painful tears, and gratefully watching every rushing figure. This unprecedented battle will inevitably shake the entire Earth's people and force them in the form of blood and fire. Tore away their vision. Thanks Avengers, thanks Mutant, I will never insult Mutant again. These shape-shifting King Kong, they saved us. Captain America stood on the ruins with a gray head, looking at the space-time tunnel disappearing in the sky, and immediately heaved a sigh of relief, and immediately began to move the heavy objects, looking for his shield. But after searching for a long time, I didn't find it, and suddenly I was a little confused. Did you see my shield? Captain America wandered around, feeling empty in his hands, making him panicked, and shouted directly at a passing shapeshifting King Kong. The shapeshifting King Kong paused, tilted his head and scanned Captain America, then nodded and said, I just saw Master Sasser took away a shield, give it up, that thing doesn't belong to you anymore. After speaking, he strode into the land bridge and disappeared in place. Captain America was stunned, the expression on his face becoming more and more confused. Why are they stealing my shield? In short, this small episode will not affect the overall situation, and everything has come to an end. Martin took away 2 infinite gems, and at the same time, he also got Captain America's unique original adamantium alloy shield. In the base of the Earth, the shock wave returned quickly, and the shield was carefully placed in the experimental monitoring instrument. The camera-like head was continuously scanned and a large amount of data was obtained. At the same time, the instrument was activated and various methods were used to monitor. This is what the creator said, the only piece of primitive adamantium alloy in the world. The ambulance did not participate in the war. After sensing that the shock wave returned a little quickly, it directly followed curiously. It is really rare to be able to produce an almost urgent attitude from the cold thinking machine of Sasser. I will reverse the synthesis formula of the original adamantium alloy. If it succeeds, we will be able to master the process of mass production of the hardest metal in the universe. Sasser looked at the large amount of data on the screen and said coldly. Immediately urged the ambulance to get out, not to hinder him. The original adamantium alloy, after integrating vibranium, not only has terrible hardness, but also has the ability of vibranium to absorb and radiate energy, which is unique in the world. It took humans more than half a century and huge amounts of manpower and material resources to restore the original adamantium alloy formula. Unfortunately, it failed repeatedly. This accidental miracle has never been replicated. I have to take a step back and study the next level real adamantium alloy. The hardness of the real adamantium alloy is no different from the original adamantium alloy, but the disadvantage is that there is no vibranium element and cannot absorb and reflect energy and kinetic energy. The second grade is the secondary adamantium alloy, which has lower hardness, but lower manufacturing cost and wider popularity. Ambulance Lane. If I were you, I would never waste time on the battlefield to snatch the original adamantium alloy, but to study the beta alloy in Wolverine's body. If I can find a way to integrate the self-healing factor with the real adamantium alloy, then more valuable. He is good at biology, so he has a keen interest in the special adamantium alloy with self-healing ability integrated with the self-healing factor in Wolverine. Shockwave didn't bother to pay attention to him. For a cold machine thinking guy, the utterance of words would not make him feel offended at all. The ambulance looked at it for a while, shrugged helplessly, left directly, and began to wonder how to negotiate with Wolverine, cutting off a bone from the opponent. Martin is back too. Although Tesseract is a top artifact, it is nothing compared to infinite gems. Martin is holding Tesseract in one hand, and the blue light radiating from it reflects the azure blue of Martin's face. He looked down for a while, and the power in his hand gradually increased, which was enough to easily squeeze a fixed star. At the moment, it was all acting on this small cube, and it continued to increase. Finally, with the buzzing sound, Tesseract was overwhelmed and burst out with the roar of the debut. The cracks gradually became dense, and finally crashed to pieces. Turned into countless blue dust. The blue space gem, lying quietly in Martin's palm, is fascinating with its bright light and the constant flow of space power. The second infinite gems. At the same time, Martin took out the yellow mind gem with his other hand, and looked carefully, feeling the extreme creation of a rule in the universe. This is a very strange feeling. It crosses countless barriers and directly touches the core law of the universe. The clock is ticking. Do you like to use infinite gems like this? This is the first time I have seen it. A clear and inexplicable voice suddenly came. In this supposedly empty and silent hall, someone suddenly spoke and reached Martin's ears. Martin opened his eyes slowly, his expression calm. Turned his head to look. What caught the eye was a slender black-haired woman with long hair reaching to the waist and graceful movements. A black dress set off her perfect figure. The charm is amazing, especially the other party has an unspeakable and powerful deterrent. In the mystery, there seems to be a magical force that will deter people's souls. Gives a feeling of almost suffocation. Unexpectedly, Martin just looked up at random. His expression did not change at all, not even the most basic surprise. He lowered his head and started to look at the two infinite gems again. For Martin, the attractiveness of infinite gems is much stronger than the attractiveness of this woman. Oh, woman, don't stop me from observing infinite gems. Martin did not speak, and the woman in black did not speak either. The two sides were so silent, as if they had known each other for a long time. The silence was natural, without any embarrassment at all. After a while, Martin raised his head, frowning slightly. Why haven't you left? The woman was silent for a while, and suddenly giggled. Her voice was pleasant, and the inexplicable deterrence became stronger. She opened the mouth and said, "Do you know who I am?" Guessed it too. Martin glanced at the other person. With that gaze, he looked at the other person from top to bottom, exclaiming the beauty, and said lightly, I just didn't expect that such a small person, I actually shocked a cosmic god like you facts. On, whenever possible, the god I don't want to deal with is you, death. The charm that is so utterly unbelievable is death, one of the 5 creation gods, not only a living god, but also the concretization of all death and the end of the law. She is the whole concept of death, and death is her originally. Death covered his mouth and let out a sweet smile. You are very interesting, you are different from everyone I have ever met. You are also very interesting. All the gods I have come into contact with are different. At least, no god rushes into other people's territory with enthusiasm and swayed by the sidelines. This can easily lead to unnecessary misunderstandings. Martin clasped infinite gems tightly with one hand, seemingly relaxed and indifferent, but he was already ready to do it. He quickly assessed the possible battle situation in his mind. What can appear here must not be the ontology. Otherwise, I don't have to fight on the ontology of the multiple-level universe, just surrender. But if it is duplication, it is the level of the level single universe, and I don't care about it. A single infinite gems is the level of the level single universe. With 2 infinite gems, it will obliterate the duplication of death in front of you. Not difficult. Death walked over casually, and the whole body was tightly packed. A slender palm was placed lightly on Martin's shoulder, gently rubbing it, leaning to the ear, and whispered, You are what I see. The most interesting guy ever, honestly, I am very interested in you. More interested in Thanos? Martin said coldly, motionless. Thanos? At least this universe's Thanos, I don't have much contact, because it's boring. Although this guy's idea is ridiculous, but it also makes me feel happy, I let him go. Death whispered, heat hit Martin's ears. Itchy. Martin felt astonished, isn't it? This universe's Thanos, is the Family Planning Commission Thanos? Compared to other cosmic neurotic licking dogs, the Family Planning Commission's 3 views are the purest, the ideal is the most noble, and the thinking is the most normal. In other words, this universe is more inclined to the movie universe? No, it should be a movie-based universe with a hybrid and timeline transition effect. After all, Marvel multi-universe is really endless. Every timeline can be divided into massive new timelines. A universe is copying itself all the time, splitting into infinite parallel universes, and these parallel universes are self-replicating and splitting every moment, to the power of infinity. It's not like the DC next door. After several major events, the orthodox infinite multi-universe was eventually slaughtered to a constant 52 universes, plus a few special fragmented universes to form a DC multi-universe, a tragic batch. The universe he is in may be a parallel universe derived from the pure movie universe. Anyway, there is no essential difference. They are all single universes, and the format is limited. It is not the universe where the zombie universe and Deadpool slaughtered the Marvel universe. It is already considered good. Martin turned his head and stared at the face of death close at hand for a while. He groaned, reached out and grabbed it, and said indifferently, My personal space is not so easy to enter. Since it is here, you have to pay the price. Even you, it is the true god of multi-universe, no exception. Death suddenly smiled with a very satisfied look, but his body suddenly retreated like a ghost. He broke out of Martin's claws, covered his mouth and smiled. Martin, you are not good enough for me. You want to realize what you think for those thoughts. I need to do more for me. Martin looked at her with a particularly strange look, with a deep surprise. I care if I can match you, it doesn't prevent me from sleeping with you. Death paused, chuckled softly, and his figure was about to slowly disappear in place. Martin snorted and shook his hands abruptly. The power of infinite gems burst out. The extreme power of the 2 cosmic laws strongly blocked everything nearby. This overbearing sudden shot forcibly locked Death in place, and fixed all forms of the opponent. Death was blocked, and his face changed in an instant, and there was a hint of unprecedented shock and anger on the beautiful face, and he said gloomily, I am a god, the supreme creation god. How dare you offend me so? What are you going crazy? I don't care about it at all. Martin has the terrible power of infinite gems in his hand to restrain everything. Immediately, he got up, walked forward slowly, and came to the face of death with an angry face, and looked at the opponent's chin for a while, showing satisfaction. Look. In the next second, he pushed towards death, with his fingers across the black long clothes, touching the opponent, and directly pushing it to bed. Then the whole person was pressed up. The next day, Martin stood up refreshed, with a happy expression on his face, dressed in his clothes calmly. Every movement was extremely stable, as if he had practiced it thousands of times. Behind him, the clothes are messy, everywhere, especially the black long dress, which has long been torn into countless pieces. Fascinating. Death's face was ugly, lying on the bed and staring at Martin, with endless anger. I heard that when different people see you, they will see different images. Everyone sees them differently. It seems that I am lucky. Martin sneered at the corner of his mouth and buttoned his shirt calmly. The expression on his face was obviously extremely satisfied with what happened last night. Whether it is body, voice, appearance, or temperament, it is impeccable. What a wonderful enjoyment. There is no such thing as a big meal. After Martin got dressed, he looked down at his death, holding the two infinite gems tightly in his hands from beginning to end. At the moment, the power of at the moment was slightly reduced, giving death a touch of ability. Since the birth of multi-universe, no one has offended me so much. Death turned his black pupils, faintly surging with death, and the rule of termination jumped and landed on Martin. The luster of infinite gems surged, and it quickly defeated this rule. Martin walked over, grabbed Death's neck, then kissed the other person's lips severely, and then sneered. Not before, that was their waste, holding you, the god of death, up high. But I am different. In my eyes, you have no essential difference from other people. Whether death or non-death, the essence is the same. The only difference is whether he has the interest to do this kind of thing. Unfortunately, he was interested last night. Death came to the door. He, Martin, is a complete conqueror. This conquest is not manifested in killing and extinction, but in every aspect. He is not the #1 Marvel dog-licking idiot like Thanos, so he took a set of infinite gems, and his strength is close to the 5 great creation gods. What he did afterwards turned out to be a planet that snapped his fingers and wiped out half of the universe, just for make death happy? Is it neurotic? There is a full set of infinite gems, and death has to kneel down and let you do it. How about using you to destroy half of the universe to please the other party? Forget it. The other Thanos, who has won the heart of the universe, has reached the almighty universe level in combat power, but still does not change his licking dog nature. The controller Thanos is more rigid. After getting the OAA's suspension, I found that I had the authority to swallow everything. The first thing I did was to swallow death, which is called normal operation. Martin is not a ridiculous licking dog like Thanos who considers himself humble. He also has a serious lack of respect for death in all forms. When facing death, he will not have the excitement and caution of facing the goddess in his heart. That's what he did. You have to understand one thing, you sent it to please me by yourself, and I have absolutely no reason to refuse. Your ultimate purpose of coming here has been completed, you can go. Martin glanced at Death calmly and said lightly. The anger in Death's eyes suddenly dissipated, and she stared at Martin for a long while, with a surprise in her eyes. She lifted the quilt and stood up calmly, revealing a beautiful posture. Martin, you are really special and different. I will always stare at you. You'd better stay strong forever. You'd better pray and don't show any flaws, otherwise I will come to take your soul. You will always be imprisoned in my hands, and then you will beg me for your favor. Martin also smiled. I think it should be the other way around. You knelt on the ground and begged me to give you a favor, maybe, and this is the most likely thing to happen. The figure of Death disappeared in the same place, and the gloomy and dead aura that had always lingered around was completely dissipated at this moment. Martin pulled out of the chair and sat down, poured himself a cup of coffee, sniffed the aroma, smiled, and took a sip. The coffee had a bitter taste and poured into the belly along the tongue, warming the body. I have to say, it is really a wonderful experience. This kind of taste is fascinating. You won't expect to come to me again, Even if you are a creation god, you won't expect such a day. Martin suddenly laughed in a low voice. He had to make the necessary preparations for the future. After thinking for a while, Martin drank the coffee, got up slowly, and came to the outside of the hall, standing on the steel building thousands of meters high, overlooking all the actions of the shape-shifting King Kong below. Roar screams, the heart is higher than the sky. His great journey, at the moment, is just the beginning. Martin raised his head again, his gaze straddling the distant cosmic vacuum, quietly watching the birth and destruction of the planets. There is such a wonderful thing in every universe. Then looking at the infinite multi-universe, how should it be? Shengjing. After defeating Chittori, the Earth won a major victory. After digesting the technology left by Chittori, the technological level of the entire Earth will jump forward again. With the vast universe and starry sky unfolding and the coordinates of the Earth have been exposed, many conflicts within the Earth now seem to be nothing to mention. First Norse mythology, now it's a real alien. This world is even crazier than we thought. Actually, there are even crazier ones. I said I have seen people on the bottom of the sea, believe it or not. Well, I still don't believe it, but it doesn't matter anymore. Those shape-shifting King Kong also participated in the New York War, and they are the absolute main force. No matter how they help, they are also on the side of the Earth. They saved my life. Hey, is there anything more important than this? They killed my life. Shield helicarrier. Fury's face was heavy, turned to look at the Avengers members, and sighed deeply. The whole of New York is about to usher in a reconstruction. In just a few hours, more than tens of millions of people have died. Looking at the entire planet, no such thing has happened. Tony interrupted Fury directly, saying, compared to this, a bigger crisis has just begun. The coordinates of the Earth have been exposed. If Chittori can know it, then other aliens can also know it. If we don't prepare early, the entire planet may be finished, and no one knows how powerful those aliens will be. Fury looked at Captain Marvel. This universe is dangerous and terrifying beyond imagination. Invasion, massacre, and destruction are happening all the time. I spend most of my time in the universe on battlefields to deal with these things. Captain Marvel shook his head, his face serious. Said, if it's just the war between interstellar civilizations and the plunder of cosmic thieves, it's still the past, and the worst thing is that some gods will just end up directly and destroy the planet at every turn. Captain Marvel has really heard a lot of such things. Some superlative gods are more ugly than the other. For example, the cosmic gods group that spreads the seeds of life and conducts biological experiments at every turn, and most of the experimental products will eventually face being rejected. The terrible fate of extinction. There are also cosmic elders that are doing things everywhere, and few of the 15 cosmic elders of level Godfather are safe. Even more terrifying is the planet devourer. As a creation god, he actually eats the life planet to satisfy his hunger. Many cosmic gods, not to mention anything else, are true gods in their mentality, and don't take the lower life forms seriously at all. It's just like Martin. Treating killing as a normal thing. Steve spoke slowly. Only more than that, Martin is still a person anyway, but some gods will only be more brutal. Captain Marvel sighed. Steve fell into silence with his arms akimbo. He had to use this action to hide his embarrassment since he left the shield empty with both hands. Fury looked at the blue sky and white clothes outside the helicarrier, and said in silence, "Don't worry, shield has been in existence for so many years, but it has sealed a lot of important weapons. It is really going to be forced to that point. It is not without resistance. Methods." Tony raised his eyebrows and looked surprised. "Wait, how many things are you hiding from us?" Fury glanced at him and said coldly, "SHIELD is a global organization. The dark side of the world you have come into contact with is beyond your imagination. Before you know it, countless agents have been sleeping forever under the surface piece. Something, you may never have the opportunity to come into contact with it." Natasha Romanoff whispered. "Martin took Tesseract and the Mind Scepter. He participated in this war for these two things, and according to what we have observed, the stone on the Mind Scepter eventually turned into a yellow gem. Then Tesseract might be like this." Infinite gems is the highest level artifact in the universe, enough to allow the weak to slaughter the gods. This weapon is obtained by people like Martin. It is too dangerous, Captain Marvel said solemnly. Someone must go to Wakanda, find Martin, and it's time to talk about it. Let Phil Coulson take care of this. Fury finally turned around, with a determination in his single eye. Wow, I thought you were going there yourself, Tony sarcastically said. Fury glared at him with a deadly eye, his gaze was meaningful. I go? Without complete certainty, Director S.H.I.E.L.D., who has too many dark secrets in his mind, will never take risks easily. He is the head of the agent, not a fighter. Find flowers, I'll go too. I'll protect Phil Coulson and also get back my shield. Steve said solemnly. After an hour, a plane flew from the helicarrier, and Phil Coulson personally piloted it, carrying Captain America all the way. Captain, this is the latest fighter, loaded with a brand new system. How do you feel? Phil Coulson shouted, and acted with life idols, which made him very excited. Steve glanced at Phil Coulson, not in the mood to speak at all. He was stuck on the seat, watching everything flashing outside. Soon, they arrived at their destination, and they were stopped by shape-shifting King Kong long ago. This is the Earth base under Cybertron. The flight squadron under the Decepticon Legion is monitoring you. 0. A fighter suddenly approached, and then suddenly turned into a shape-shifting King Kong, stepped on the shield fighter with a thud, and screamed against the glass. This show operation made Phil Coulson and Steve pale. The fuselage shook violently and finally barely landed. I am Agent Phil Coulson, representing S.H.I.E.L.D. I hope to talk to your leader Martin. Phil Coulson took a deep breath, stabilized the beating of his heart, and looked up at these big guys. The shape-shifting King Kong suddenly pressed his head down, and his two electronic eyes kept shrinking. Accompanied by bursts of metallic sounds, he seemed to be scanning something. At the same time, he said in a bad voice, Phil Coulson, S.H.I.E.L.D. high-level agent, based on your identity, I don't deserve to see the Creator face to face. Let Fury's salted egg come. Besides, the Creator is not here either. Phil Coulson's heart jumped and said, not here? Where did he go? I mean, I need to arrange a time for the two parties to meet. Steve said at the same time, I want to get my shield back. You stole it. Pay attention to the wording, despicable S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. Every word you say, I will record it in the database. The shape-shifting King Kong roared, and the shaking Phil Coulson couldn't even stand still. Martin is indeed not here. Others are already in a certain country in the east, and he is going to a very mysterious place. Kamar Taj. Before leaving the Earth, Mr. Steven, can you sign me? Mr. Steven, the local government decided to award you an award specifically in recognition of your excellent surgical ability. A middle-aged man with a thin face, at the moment sitting on the hospital bed with a numb face. Countless honors are leaving him forever. Stephen Strange, the top local surgeon in Philadelphia, is famous for his almost horrible surgical success rate. Similarly, his reputation is matched by his terrifying operation fees and terrible personality. He sat on the bed helplessly, staring blankly at his trembling hands full of steel nails. My hand. Is there really no way to cure it? Stephen desperately controlled his hands, but it was of no use. The hands were still trembling violently, which meant that he could no longer perform operations on others in his life. His future is ruined. Answer me. There is still a way to recover my hands. Stephen looked scared, his eyes were bloodshot, and he looked at the assistant beside him with cannibalistic eyes. Stephen, you need to be calm. A good attitude will help you recover, the assistant whispered. No, tell me loudly. I can save it with my hands. Stephen's eyes were blood red, like a hideous and desperate monster. The assistant's eyes were complicated. He personally performed the operation on Stephen, who was in a car accident. He definitely knew that the Star Doctor's hands weren't saved. Completely scrapped, Stephen let out a cry full of pain. Damn bastard. Why are you operating on me without authorization? Don't do things you are not sure about, I told you already. Stephen was about to get out of bed. The pain in his hand made him scream, and he fell straight down, on the ground. Stephen felt the coldness without a touch of temperature, and was desperate in his heart. He is the best doctor and definitely can judge the result. Reason told him that he was completely finished. Stephen smashed through the crowd, dressed in a medical suit, staggered all the way into the street, watching everything numbly. Stephen, your hands are no longer medically recoverable, the straight assistant chased up. Stephen Rage turned around and looked at him with cannibalistic eyes. So, what do you want to say? I mean, medical methods are useless, but you can try to find non-medical methods. The assistant was scared and took a step back. Stephen's eyes moved with his assistant's fingers, and he looked at the large screen on the side of the street. It was playing a fierce war scene, a large number of alien creatures slaughtering New York City, a desperate doomsday scene, but with the superheroes participating in the war, especially after a large number of shape-shifting King Kongs swarmed into the battlefield, the disadvantage was reversed. Accompanied by passionate background music, those shape-shifting King Kongs who rushed back and forth on the battlefield, venting their firepower, left a deep impression on people. The almost perfect war capability, like the cooperation of thousands of drills, and all kinds of strange weapons, at the moment all bombarded the Kitarui army. It seems to be a sci-fi blockbuster. They are non-medical methods. There must be someone who can heal your hands. Looking at these guys with extraordinary powers, Stephen barely lifted his spirits, and finally there was a glimmer of hope. The first thing he did was to go to New York and found Professor X from Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. I'm sorry, Mr. Stephen, I understand your request, but I can't help you. Professor X looked down at the dollar bills in the box and raised his head with regret. You are one of the most powerful mutants in the world. If you can't cure me, who else can I go to? Stephen looked desperate and miserable. Professor X was silent for a while, and said solemnly, I can recommend you 2 people, their possible cure. But I don't make sure they will see you. Who? I have a lot of money. Who can heal my hands? I am willing to give them all my money. Stephen was extremely excited. Professor X was silent for a moment and said, one is Martin. He should be the second most powerful human being on this planet. He not only possesses the ability to destroy the world, but also has the ability to create a strong civilization. He and his intelligent robots, there is a high probability that there will be a cure for you. Professor X has a sincere expression on his face. He said the truth. Martin must have a way to heal a pair of lost hands, but the problem is the man with Angel and the Devil mixed together. He won't see me. Stephen only heard the name, and he died immediately. Martin's prestige has long been heard all over the world. Everything he does is extremely bloody and domineering. No one in the world knows him. Especially after the 2 major events of Odin's arrival on the Earth and Chittori's invasion of New York, everyone realized what Martin meant to the Earth. The strongest and most iron-blooded barrier. Martin can heal him. Stephen is convinced of this, but it is impossible for him to see Martin at all, let alone use the so-called money to make Martin condescend to heal him. Stephen felt that he was more likely to be killed as soon as he met him. Is there another person? Stephen looked hopeful and perturbed. Professor X crossed his fingers, paused, and said solemnly, there is another person, who should be the most powerful human on this planet. She has guarded the Earth for 500 years and is a living legend. The magical power of this is beyond imagination. She? Where is she? Go west, cross the Pacific Ocean, and climb the roof of the world. If she wants to see you, you will naturally find him. If he doesn't want to see you. Professor X shook his head. Stephen walked away with a confused and hesitant look, holding a note in his hand with the name of a place written on it. Kamar Taj. Chin looked puzzled. Professor, why did you take the time to meet this ordinary person? Isn't the strongest human being Martin? He even defeated Odin. Professor X replied, I am not sure which of the 2 of them is stronger, and I also just learned that the place actually exists. His eyes were extremely deep, recalling just now, when the extremely stalwart spirit came into his mind, he carefully asked him to guide Stephen to find Kamar Taj. At this moment, Professor X immediately understood that some specious legends in the past were true, and all the stories hidden behind almost absurdities and myths were true. However, Martin seems to be on the roof of the world, the two of them. Professor X frowned. I just hope everything goes well.